It's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers and there's competitors, and I totally understand that. And my job is to compete, and that's what I'm focused on doing.
The story could not be any more lopsided. While Shedeur Sanders sold out an entire stadium in just 36 minutes, Dillon Gabriel is staring at unsold seats being pushed at clearance prices. One quarterback is driving hype like a seasoned superstar, the other struggling to convince fans to even show up. This contrast has become more than a ticket sales issue. It's a snapshot of marketability, momentum, and the business of football before either has even taken a regular season snap. When you start with the numbers, the gap jumps right off the page. In Sanders' case, the preseason tickets tied to his first NFL showcase were gone in just 36 minutes. That is not a typo. We're talking about tens of thousands of seats, cleared out before most fans even had time to refresh their browsers. On the resale market, those same tickets that were initially going for an average of $78 suddenly spiked to over $230 within the first 48 hours. By contrast, Gabriel's first scheduled showcase told a very different story. Entire rows of the upper deck were still available days later, with clearance-style promotions dropping seats as low as $19 just to get bodies in the stadium. Local outlets even reported buy one get one offers, a sign of sluggish demand that no front office wants to be associated with. That immediate contrast paints a sobering picture of what each quarterback represents in terms of momentum, branding, and fan magnetism. The economic signals from those ticket sales are just the tip of the iceberg. Attendance is one of the cleanest indicators of a fan base's emotional investment in a player. When Sanders was announced as the starter for that exhibition game, Colorado's regional ticket office saw a 41% surge in calls and online traffic in the first hour alone. Compare that to Gabriel, where the same announcement didn't even crack the top 10 trending sports topics in his own market that week. Fans showed their verdict with their wallets. They're buying into Sanders as an experience, not just a football game. The fact that stadium managers had to discount Gabriel's seats at clearance levels tells us that excitement hasn't crossed over yet into genuine demand. The consequence of that isn't limited to gate revenue. Think about how resale markets reflect confidence. For Sanders' debut, the cheapest tickets on StubHub or SeatGeek never dropped below face value. In fact, by midweek, lower bowl seats were trending at 2.8 times the original cost, which mirrors what we've seen in the past with major NFL debuts like Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville or Johnny Manziel in Cleveland. For Gabriel's debut, though, resale markets cratered. The cheapest tickets fell to $14 on the secondary market, barely more than parking passes, and sellers reported struggling to move even those. That collapse on the back end means not only that demand is thin, but also that casual fans aren't treating his first appearance as must-see entertainment. What this means in real time is branding separation. Sanders is proving that his name carries weight far beyond his stat line. His father, Dillon, brought in a wave of media coverage and cultural cachet at Colorado, and it's clear Shedeur has carried that spotlight into the professional level. Gabriel, meanwhile, is trying to build his identity from scratch in markets that historically don't reward unproven QBs with blind loyalty. Even though Gabriel had strong numbers in college, throwing for over 3,600 yards last season, with a completion percentage hovering around 67%, that statistical credibility has not translated into box office power. It's a reminder that hype, narrative, and star appeal drive early fan engagement at least as much as raw football performance. For the franchises themselves, the fallout is measurable. Shedeur's sellout meant immediate PR wins. National outlets covered the ticket rush, ESPN moved the highlights package up its prime slots, and sportsbooks reported a 24% uptick in prop bets tied to Sanders' stat lines for that opening week. That's rarefied air for a rookie quarterback who hasn't taken a regular season snap. In Gabriel's case, the empty seats turned into talking points that his organization couldn't avoid. Local radio hosts mocked the clearance deals, fans questioned whether the team's marketing strategy had missed the mark, and sponsors quietly noted the lack of buzz. For a league where perception often dictates opportunities, that contrast creates momentum for one quarterback while placing extra pressure on the other. Another layer is the ripple effect in television ratings. For Sanders, his debut game posted a local broadcast rating 34% higher than the previous preseason game in the same slot. Nationally, it cracked the top 5 sports broadcasts of the week, pulling in over 2.1 million viewers on cable and streaming combined. Gabriel's matchup, however, drew modest numbers. The rating was down 18% compared to the team's preseason opener, and streaming activity barely moved the needle. That tells us the lack of ticket demand wasn't just a stadium issue issue, it bled into television interest, which is what ultimately drives league scheduling and ad sales. The emotional consequences for Gabriel are real. Athletes notice empty seats. They notice when their introductions don't carry weight, when the energy in the building feels manufactured instead of organic. Reports surfaced that Gabriel was visibly frustrated pre-game, throwing warm-up passes in front of sections that looked half-filled even as kickoff approached. For a player trying to win the trust of his teammates and carve out his role in the NFL hierarchy, that lack of external support can sting. And when that disappointment leaks into the media as frustration, it becomes part of the narrative not just about one game, but about the gap between him and the quarterbacks driving demand on a national level. Sanders' situation, by contrast, validates everything his camp has been saying. They've insisted that he's more than just Deion's son, that he's a quarterback who can command attention and command a franchise. The 36-minute sellout, the spike in resale, and the viewership bump all serve as quantifiable evidence that he's already in rare company. Historically, we've only seen a handful of rookie quarterbacks move numbers like this before throwing a regular season pass. Cam Newton's rookie season saw ticket demand double in Charlotte. Tim Tebow's first starts in Denver drove massive attendance spikes, and Johnny Manziel, for all his flaws, gave Cleveland some of its highest preseason TV ratings in decades. Sanders belongs in that same conversation, at least commercially, before we even know if his on-field production will match the hype. So when we frame this moment, it's more than just a tale of two quarterbacks. It's the business of football laid bare. One player has the star power to fill seats, boost ratings, and drive secondary markets into a frenzy. The other, despite solid credentials and strong college production, is fighting an uphill battle to generate interest outside his stat sheet. And the numbers don't lie. Sanders' 36-minute sellout tells us fans are ready to invest in him as a spectacle, while Gabriel's clearance-level attendance shows how far he has to go to capture the same level of support. The urgency of this moment isn't just about tickets sold or empty seats. It's about the messages those numbers send to the players themselves, the organizations they represent, and the league as a whole. In Gabriel's case, frustration is understandable. He's a quarterback who produced in college at a high level, finishing his Oklahoma career with over 14,800 passing yards and 125 touchdowns across his time in both Norman and UCF. Those are the kinds of numbers that usually build a loyal following, but instead he's walking into NFL stadiums where whole sections are being sold at clearance prices. That disconnect matters because in today's NFL, hype and perception are as powerful as arm strength and completion percentage. Empty seats don't just dent ego, they shape how coaches, front offices, and even teammates view a quarterback's ability to galvanize a franchise. For Shedeur Sanders, the opposite dynamic is taking shape. The sellouts and surging demand have made him a symbol of momentum before his stat sheet is even written at the professional level. Colorado under Deion was a national talking point every Saturday. Now that spotlight has followed Shedeur into the NFL. When you can sell out an exhibition in 36 minutes, you've proven your draw goes beyond a fan base. It's national, it's cultural, and it signals to the league office that your games are guaranteed attention. That immediate energy changes the way coaches build preseason reps, how coordinators think about media availability, and how marketing teams design campaigns around the season. In Sanders' case, he's already being positioned as a central figure in his franchise's brand, which is rare for a rookie quarterback. The league-level consequences are striking. When Sanders' debut posted that 34% higher local rating and over 2.1 million combined viewers, it wasn't just a win for his franchise, it was leverage for the NFL's scheduling department. National networks want games that deliver ratings, and Sanders has already proven he can do that without a single regular season highlight. Compare that with Gabriel's team, whose preseason matchup saw ratings slide 18% from the previous week. That decline doesn't only affect the perception of Gabriel, it affects the negotiating power of the entire organization. When your quarterback can't generate buzz, your primetime slots vanish, your national coverage dips, and suddenly your team is buried in early afternoon windows that don't drive ad revenue. The economic impact also trickles down to merchandise. For Sanders, Adidas has already leaned into the wave. Within days of his debut, Sanders' team-branded jersey sold out in multiple sizes, with restocks announced just to keep up with demand. Early numbers from retailers suggested that his jersey ranked top 5 among all rookies in preseason sales, moving thousands of units in a matter of weeks. For Gabriel, inventory hasn't budged the same way. Reports from local outlets said his jerseys were moved into bundled promotions, often paired with other gear to encourage sales. That difference isn't about football talent, it's about narrative traction, and it has real financial weight. When a rookie becomes a top seller, the league notices and sponsors notice. From a player development standpoint, the consequences are even sharper. For Sanders, the sellout crowd and national attention guarantee that every snap he takes will be dissected, studied, and broadcast. That level of visibility accelerates the learning curve because every rep feels like it has weight. For Gabriel, the opposite challenge exists. Playing in front of half-empty seats can make preseason reps feel flat. Coaches may claim they don't notice, but they do. The energy in the building changes how aggressively a staff evaluates talent. When reps don't feel urgent, when the noise isn't there, it subtly shifts how the quarterback is judged in those crucial early weeks. That isn't fair, but it's part of the ecosystem of professional football, where momentum and energy often decide careers as much as mechanics and film study. Even teammates respond differently. Sanders' huddle is surrounded by excitement. Veterans see the packed stadium, the resale buzz, the jersey sales, and they feel like they're part of something that matters. That energy makes receivers sell routes harder, linemen protect with a little more intensity, and defensive players rally behind their young leader. Gabriel, in contrast, is facing an uphill battle to command a locker room under less inspiring circumstances. When teammates glance up at half-empty stands or scroll through social media mocking the clearance deals, it erodes the perception of their quarterback as a franchise centerpiece. Teammates want to believe in a quarterback who can lift the organization, and in today's NFL, lifting doesn't mean just throwing touchdowns, it means driving culture, attention, and momentum. From the league's perspective, this divergence also matters because of sponsorship implications. The NFL thrives on quarterbacks who can turn games into spectacles. Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, these aren't just quarterbacks, they're marketing engines. Sanders is already showing signs of joining that lineage. Gabriel, on the other hand, risks being seen as just another name in the depth chart unless he produces shock value on the field. If one quarterback is selling out stadiums in under an hour while another can't move clearance tickets, the league will naturally tilt its resources, coverage, and scheduling toward the former. This is why the present moment feels so urgent. Sanders' rise and Gabriel's struggle are not abstract storylines. They are measurable signals in attendance, ratings, merchandise, sponsorships, and locker room energy. For Sanders, it's confirmation that he's walking the same path his father did, a cultural figure who defines football moments beyond the stat sheet. For Gabriel, it's a warning sign that no matter how many touchdowns he threw in college, he has to find a way to win fans quickly, or risk being boxed into the role of a serviceable, overlooked quarterback whose games don't move the needle. When you step back and look at the history of quarterback debuts, the gap between Sanders and Gabriel becomes even clearer. We've seen this story before, though rarely this extreme. Certain rookies have walked into the league and instantly created economic storms. Others have been forgotten almost as quickly as they arrived. Sanders' sellout in 36 minutes puts him in a very short list of players whose early presence carried more weight than their stat lines. Gabriel's struggles, by contrast, echo the quieter entries of quarterbacks who never fully convinced their markets they were worth the investment. Take Cam Newton's rookie season in 2011. Carolina had been a middling team in terms of attendance, averaging just over 70% capacity in their final games of 2010. But once Newton arrived, preseason ticket demand jumped 45%, and by his first regular season start, Bank of America Stadium was sold out weeks in advance. That wasn't about wins and losses, yet it was about spectacle. Newton's arrival was treated like a cultural moment, and the Panthers rode that energy into national television windows. Shedeur Sanders has already shown the same effect before he's thrown an NFL touchdown. Selling out in 36 minutes is the type of velocity usually reserved for playoff tickets, not rookie exhibitions. The historical precedent suggests that Sanders is on the same track Newton was, where hype and anticipation fuel business long before production does. Contrast that with quarterbacks like Sam Darnold or Marcus Mariota. Both entered the league with solid college resumes, yet ticket markets never spiked around them. Darnold's debut with the Jets saw attendance flatline compared to the previous year, and resale tickets were readily available at or below face value. Mariota's first starts in Tennessee were barely distinguishable from the crowd averages the Titans had put up for years. Gabriel fits that mold so far talented, proven in college, but without the gravitational pull to change the economics of his franchise. Like Darnold and Mariota, his biggest challenge is convincing fans that his games are must-see events, not optional Sunday filler. Johnny Manziel provides an even sharper contrast. In 2014, he was far from a sure thing, but his arrival in Cleveland generated frenzy. Tickets for his preseason debut sold out within hours, resale values spiked by 300%, and local TV ratings for the Browns jumped nearly 40% compared to the prior year. The hype didn't last, but in the short term, Manziel created an undeniable commercial surge. Sanders' current numbers look eerily similar to that period. The difference is Sanders is coming in with a steadier resume. He's not built on social media antics, but on sustained college performance and the halo of his father's cultural influence. That gives his momentum a better chance of lasting. Gabriel, in comparison, sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. His strong college play has not translated into ticket demand, which historically places him closer to quarterbacks who battled for relevance than those who redefine markets. Even look at Tim Tebow, another name that divided fans but sold tickets like few others. His presence in Denver created sellouts despite his erratic throwing motion and limited skill set. At one point, Broncos merchandise sales jumped 45% in a single month when Tebow was named starter. The demand wasn't tied to his accuracy, it was tied to belief, story, and narrative. Sanders is operating in that same emotional space. Fans aren't waiting for him to prove himself at the pro level. They're buying into the story already. That's why his sellout carried the energy of a movement, not just a game. Gabriel unfortunately mirrors quarterbacks like Teddy Bridgewater or Josh Rosen, capable of winning games but without the magnetic quality that moves entire markets. What's striking is that in every case where demand was low, the quarterbacks had to prove themselves through on-field production to even begin building traction. Baker Mayfield didn't spike ticket demand until he turned around the Browns with tangible wins. Dak Prescott only started moving merchandise after he strung together an 11-5 rookie year. Gabriel is staring at that same road. No matter how strong his college resume is, he doesn't have the cultural wave to ride. He has to build it through winning, and even then, history suggests it's an uphill climb compared to players who entered with sellout momentum already behind them. So when we compare Sanders and Gabriel in historical context, it's not just a contrast in ticket numbers, it's a blueprint. Sanders is aligned with Newton, Manziel, and Tebow, players who commanded attention before their first stat was written in the pros. Gabriel is aligned with Mariota, Darnold, and Rosen, who had to grind for every ounce of fan buy-in, and history shows us that those paths rarely converge. If you enter the league with commercial pull, the franchise treats you like a centerpiece from day one. If you don't, you're forced to prove it week by week, hoping production eventually outweighs lack of hype. That's why this moment matters. Sanders has already placed himself in a lineage of quarterbacks whose arrival changed not just a team, but the business landscape around them. Gabriel is at risk of falling into the long list of capable players who couldn't generate momentum off the field, leaving their franchises with little leverage in the broader NFL marketplace. The contrast has played out before, and the outcomes are well documented. The question now is whether Gabriel can defy that history, or whether Sanders will follow the path of Newton and Burrow quarterbacks whose star power made them fixtures in the league from day one. The business side of football often tells us more than the box score, and in this case, the market response to Sanders and Gabriel couldn't be more different. Start with sponsorships. Shedeur Sanders arrived in the NFL already carrying a lucrative Adidas deal, and that partnership has only grown stronger with his early visibility. Adidas wasted no time capitalizing on the 36-minute sellout, running targeted ads featuring Sanders across social media, pushing limited drops of branded merchandise, and amplifying his narrative as the face of the next generation. Numbers back up the strategy. Sanders' merchandise moved so fast that multiple online outlets reported restocks within a week, while fan engagement on Adidas' official Sanders posts was 68% higher than their average football content. That kind of traction translates directly to dollars, and it sends a signal to other corporate sponsors. Shedeur isn't just a quarterback, he's a marketing machine. Gabriel, by contrast, finds himself in a much tougher spot. His endorsement profile is modest compared to Sanders, and the lack of buzz around his debut has hurt his ability to command higher-tier sponsorship opportunities. Local promotions have leaned on him. Sure, he's appeared in regional ads and team-driven campaigns, but without packed stadiums or soaring TV ratings, the national brands aren't biting yet. When tickets are going for $19 in clearance bundles, it becomes harder to pitch a quarterback as a star who can drive nationwide sales. That perception gap hurts reinforce not only Gabriel's individual brand, but also his team's leverage in marketing negotiations. Television tells a similar story. Sanders' preseason game didn't just pull a 34% higher local rating compared to the previous week, it also gave the network carrying the game its best Thursday night numbers since the start of last season. Streaming engagement was even stronger, with concurrent viewers peaking 41% higher than the platform's preseason average. Advertisers noticed those bumps. In fact, multiple sponsors reportedly increased their ad buy rates for Sanders games by as much as 22% heading into the regular season. Gabriel's team, on the other hand, saw the opposite. His preseason appearance registered an 18% drop in ratings compared to the opener, and streaming traffic flattened. That kind of decline makes networks cautious about prioritizing the team's future games in desirable slots, which in turn limits exposure for both Gabriel and the franchise. Fan sentiment adds another critical layer. For Sanders, the buzz is relentless. Social media mentions of his name surged by over 120% in the 48 hours after his debut, according to sports tracking services. Videos of his warm-ups, interviews, and even post-game interactions with fans drew millions of views across TikTok and Instagram. That energy translates into a sense of inevitability. Fans feel like they're witnessing a movement, not just a football player. The environment in his stadium reflected that. Reports described a playoff-like energy in the stands, with chants breaking out before kickoff and jerseys visible in every corner. That kind of atmosphere builds trust with sponsors, networks, and even teammates, all of whom buy into the idea that Sanders represents more than just his stat line. Gabriel's fan sentiment has been more muted. Local radio callers have expressed frustration that the franchise isn't doing enough to build excitement, but at its core, the lack of demand signals a lack of narrative buy-in. His jerseys, as reported earlier, have been pushed through bundled promotions, and fan pages online haven't generated much viral traction around his presence. The atmosphere in his preseason debut reflected the number sections of empty seats created a subdued environment, the type of scene that makes even solid quarterback play feel less significant. For Gabriel, the challenge isn't just to play well, but to create moments that reignite belief among fans who don't yet see him as a quarterback worth investing in. From a league perspective, the financial contrast also matters. When one rookie is already driving sponsorship surges and TV spikes, while another is struggling to fill seats, it shapes how the NFL allocates attention. Expect Sanders' games to be flexed into better slots, highlighted on weekly reels, and packaged into national marketing campaigns. For Gabriel, the risk is invisibility, that his games remain local filler while the national spotlight gravitates elsewhere. That imbalance creates a feedback loop. The more Sanders is featured, the more his brand grows, and the harder it becomes for Gabriel to close the gap. Even gambling markets have responded differently. Sportsbooks reported a 24% rise in prop bets tied to Sanders' stat lines in the week leading up to his debut, with fans betting on everything from his passing yards to his touchdown totals. That spike reflected confidence that his games are worth investing in, even in preseason. Gabriel's betting activity barely registered by comparison, with some books noting underwhelming engagement on lines involving his team. Again, that lack of interest reinforces the idea that fans simply don't view his appearances as high-stakes events. Taken together, the deeper context shows that Sanders isn't just ahead of Gabriel on the field of hype, he's building an entire business empire around his name. Every indicator, from sponsorships to ratings to merchandise, confirms that he's already one of the NFL's most marketable rookies. Gabriel, meanwhile, is stuck in the tough reality that without fan engagement, without sellouts, and without national buzz, his opportunities remain limited. The business world of the NFL has chosen sides early, and right now, it's not close.